the vibes of the Panthers heading into this NFL draft season? I'll ask someone right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council, because on Fridays throughout the entirety of the offseason, I'm right here answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. All you got to do is either at me or DM me over on Twitter at Julian Council or at me over on Blue Sky at Julian Council to get your questions in for this week's edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Excited about today's episode of Locked On Panthers as we have another guest. Again, I told y'all on Mondays and Wednesdays throughout this month, I'm trying to have a guest on to break up the monotony of me and also to get more opinions on this team and the draft upcoming. As I've told you, the draft is not necessarily like my strong suit. I'm not necessarily like looking at the tape and saying, oh, this guy and that guy. Like, yeah, I do watch it, but I'm not like a grinder of the tape like some of these guys are and who really look at this all season long. Like, I love college football. And when I watch it on Saturdays in the fall, I am not thinking about how good that player would be here in Carolina or in the NFL. I'm just enjoying what is out there in front of me when watching those games. But still excited about what's to come this month as the Panthers are going to continue to build this team. And, you know, maybe not that far away from contention in the NFC South. But got Vashti of Carolina Blitz on today's show. I'm sure y'all know who she is. She's all over Panther Twitter. She does a great job covering this team and covering a ton here throughout the state, as she is all over the place. I know she's been covering Duke right now as they're headed to the Final Four down in San Antonio this weekend. So got up with Vashti, get some time with her to ask her just, overall vibe check on this team, some of the moves that they made, some of the needs they still have, and, all that and how far they are from potentially being a contender. So we got Vashti Carolina Blitz coming up here on Locked On Panthers. All right, back here on Locked On Panthers, and as promised, Vashti of Carolina Blitz. Follow her on Twitter at Miss Carolina Blitz. Vashti, happy to have you on. As always, was talking to you and Alex Zeitlo a couple weeks ago during ACC Media Day, and or not ACC Tournament, and I was thinking to myself, you know what? I got to bring this conversation onto the show because it's been a while since I had you on. So appreciate you coming on. I know you've been busy. You were just up in Newark watching Duke do their thing. Are you headed down to San Antonio or are you not going?
Yeah, I'm going.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not going to get off the ride right at the climax. Come on now. We're going to follow this thing through.
All right. Hey, man, that's why I appreciate you. You got to be, of all the media people in this state, got to be the hardest working because you'll be at a Panthers practice, and that night you'll be at Cameron Indoor. It'll be a Saturday. You'll be at Cameron, and you go over to Carolina as well, to the Dean Dome, be back on a Sunday. Crazy. So I appreciate you and all the work you do. I appreciate you coming up on here today. But kind of just want to get like an off-season vibe check on where this team's at right now as we are counting down the days to the draft. When people watch and listen to this, will be 22 days away from the first round of the draft up there in Green Bay. I look at their offseason so far, and I think there's reasons to be optimistic based off of what they've added defensively. And I see a lot of parallels to what they did last offseason where they were full on the offense, especially on the offensive line, and kind of doing the same thing on those pieces defensive line-wise. How are you feeling about kind of the moves that they made and the direction this organization's headed in second year of Dave Canales and Dan Morgan?
Yeah, well, they told us during the combine that their main objective would be to stop the run. When your defense is on the wrong side of history as far as points given up, obviously that's an area that you need to address, and they went full stop on addressing some of those key positions on that side of the ball. Safety, of course, shoring up some positions on that defensive line. So, I mean, I think that they made steps in the right direction. And so now it's, are the guys going to be a right fit? Are you going to have good value for these guys? JC's contract is already looking like in a couple of years, it's going to be a steal if he plays up to it. And then you have other guys, they didn't get the big fish that they wanted, but they signed a couple other guys. Could there be a Louisville type diamond in the rough player that they saw promise in and who could be a top guy along that defensive line? We'll see. But as far as addressing those needs on a defense that was porous last year, I think was important.
Yeah, you look at just like checking boxes. I mean, defensive tackle, Bobby Brown comes in, also brought in Turk Wharton. So you check those box, edge rusher, even though I kind of feel like they need more there, adding Pat Jones a second. Okay, that checks a box. Christian Roseboom coming in at linebacker to compete there with Trevor Wallace and with Josie Jewell. Then at safety, like Trevor Morrig. So they checked every single box that you would want them to check defensively. And you're right. It comes down to, will those guys turn out to be a right fit? Can they, when it comes to Sundays, can they actually kind of make the plays? And you look at the Milton Williams thing too, because I mean, 26 mil per year is crazy, especially when you got Derek Brown making 24 here. So I don't really know I don't know if DB is that kind of guy who's going to be upset about them trying to pay another guy more than him. But still, it's like, that's just insane to give that to him. But they use that money to get Bobby Brown, to get Pat Jones, and to get Turk Wharton. And it kind of makes a little bit more sense. So I do appreciate that they seem to have a plan now, because back in the past, that overpay would happen. Like, does it feel like to you that it seems like they finally have a focus and like a discipline that might have been lacking in the past?
Yeah, I mean, for what they would have paid, they got 3 guys for the
Right.
same value, basically. And they were aggressive. And I think that there were rumors that they were in on a couple wide receivers potentially, and then they missed out on Williams. But I think that they did what they needed to do to get the most value with the money that they had. And that's why you pay those guys the big bucks.
You talk about wide receiver. I know I've been pretty big on them trying to upgrade that spot. Like, you look at it right now compared to what was last year. Thielen, Coker, Leggett, you got to feel good about that. Now, do you feel great about it? For me right now, no. But potentially, if you see the steps from Coker and Leggett, you can feel really good about it once the season really gets going and those guys can make some plays. I still feel like they need to try to find somebody else, but I don't really know at this point in time how realistic that is when all the names that you would have talked about, like, I mean, Deebo Samuel, I don't think really was a name. I don't know if they were in on that or not, but still, that's a name at this point in time. I don't know if he's truly a number one, but T. Higgins, he never came available. You look at Chris Godwin was never really available. DK Metcalf, that was the big one, was never really available. Like, how are you feeling about where that spot's at? And if there's really any realistic thoughts about them being able to upgrade that at this point in time, or are they kind of just going to ride what they got?
Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, Xavier Leggett kind of got, I mean, he did not have a breakout rookie year, right?
Right.
And he had his share of drops, but honestly, he was not supposed to be that guy. That was supposed to be Deontay Johnson. And then Xavier was kind of supposed to be, I think, maybe mainly a red zone target, jump ball type guy. And Deontay was supposed to stretch the field with his speed. I think that's something that Dave Canales still wants. You need speed along that in that wide receiver room. And if they're gonna address it, I think that Leggett and Coker kind of provide you that red zone threat, but you don't have anybody that can stretch the field, and that really helps keep defenses honest. So if they do get a guy, they need to get a guy who's a speedster. And, where they find that, I don't know, but I do think it'll be beneficial for them to try to upgrade the position in that manner specifically.
Yeah. And I appreciate, like Dan did say too, while there were obvious needs, like he talked about, like, we have obvious needs defensively and we're going to have to go out there and fix those. He did say they would not neglect the offense. And there can be people saying, well, they have done that. It's like, no, they haven't. They brought back the entirety of the offensive line. And we all know here recently, like, when they have continuity and those dudes stay healthy, they typically win games. When they don't have continuity and they're all banged up, they don't win games. Like, that's just been the case here recently. So I appreciate what he did there, especially too, they bring in Rico Dowdle. I thought that was interesting, especially where he was saying last week, as when speaking to Darren Gann of Panthers.com, that his market wasn't really what he thought it was going to be. But to add another 1,000-yard rusher from a year ago in there with Chuba to kind of make up for Jonathan Brooks not being there, like, I don't think you can be mad about that at all. I just still look at, like, you got to continue to build around Bryce, and that receiver spot's just kind of the one that's missing to me. And maybe even a little bit about tight end too, but I don't really know. I guess probably draft would probably be where they're going to go, because I don't.
I mean, I'm actually. I think they need some depth at the tight end position, but
For sure.
I've seen them throw around numbers like they might go with in the first round for a tight end, and I said, now come on, like I feel like there are other places of need outside of tight end where they could use a potential player with that type of value. So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't I wouldn't be surprised if they went maybe even undrafted went for a tight end. I think they have, their main two guys, and then where they go from there is where they go for depth.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, I know last year I had people being like, oh, the Panthers needed to trade up and get Brock Bowers. I was like, oh, I don't know if that's what we're trying to do. But now looking at it, it's like, man, maybe they should have got Brock Bowers last year because he was pretty damn good out there in Vegas, even though we all knew like the need truly was at receiver and they addressed that. So tight end, I mean, I know the guys that they're talking about. I mean, I get it. Like Tyler Warren at a Penn State, good player. I still look at the needs that they have. That probably won't be the one I'm trying to address first round if I'm Carolina. Now we'll see what they decide to do. But at least for me, talking about this and you talking about this, I don't know about that. But let's take a quick pause because there's some other spots too, defensively, like safety, edge rusher. Kind of want to get into that and also kind of look at where they stand right now in the NFC South and see, just how far away they are. Because as we know, this division is always wide open. So we'll be back here in just a moment with Vashti here on Locked On Panthers. Imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person. Getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Gametime comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Gametime picks curation makes it easier to find better value for tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. With seat views before you buy, no surprise fees, and a lowest price guarantee, you can book with total confidence. And if you're a Duke Blue Devil fan, why not get out there to the Final Four? Carolina's not there to beat you this time, so you probably have a great chance of winning a national championship. And, well, Gametime is the place to go get your tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, back here on Locked On Panthers, a little off-season vibe check with Vashti. Check her out, Carolina Blitz. She is all over the place. I'm sure y'all already interact with her. She interacts with Panther fans more than anybody out there. So, maybe I should be better about that. But
we talked about that, Julian.
Yeah, we did talk about it. But you got us, you and Sheena and Mike K too. You got us covered, but I got to do better. I'll be better. I promise y'all. Some of y'all be crazy, man.
Yeah, but you gotta ignore the crazies. They're the Panthers fans. It's a solid group. It's a solid group. So shout out to Panthers fans.
That's true, and I appreciate y'all because if y'all weren't solid, we wouldn't be rocking with Vashti, wouldn't be rocking with me, wouldn't be helping pay these bills. So I appreciate everybody out there for following our content. But looking at some other needs, like defensively again, like I think defensive line, they're probably good. Like I saw a mock draft talking about they would get a dude at defensive tackle top 10. I was like, I don't know about that, man, because you already got Derek Brown coming back. They're going to look at that as an addition, as he missed the majority of last season. And you got A'Shawn Robinson coming back, Shai Tuttle in a more reduced role, which he's better, I think, in that spot as a backup and not being asked to play as many snaps as he was the last couple of years. Bobby Brown III comes in, Turk Wharton, all those guys rotating around Derek. He can throw in LeBron Ray as well. They're probably in a good spot there defensive tackle wise. I look at edge rusher though.
Yeah.
And I still don't see the Brian Burns replacement. And I did not expect them to replace Brian Burns last offseason, but it's hard for me to look at them letting him go, trading him away, and then going 2 off seasons without finding that replacement. And to me, like at 8, that's got to be the spot because obviously Myles Garrett thing didn't work out. I don't think that was ever really a realistic possibility. Trey Hendrickson, that's still going out right now, but like he's not really a scheme fit. To me, like that's the drafts where you got to fulfill that. So I still look at like Clowney. Okay. Thought he played fine last year. Was he ever going to be that big sack guy? No. Wonham, if healthy, I think there's something there. Pat Jones second. I never really seen him play football, so I can't really say anything other than look at the numbers. And okay, like that doesn't really excite me all that much. I don't know how you feel about the edge group, but I feel like they still got to add.
Yeah, Clowney played more snaps than he was supposed to last year because of injuries, right? He was really supposed to be a situational pass edge rush guy. And so when you get up in age, like you don't expect to play these snaps. You really want to be a money down type guy, and he was more than a money down type guy. I think he has a bit in the tank. We're on of course, the latter end. We're probably like maybe a quarter left in that tank, but that's enough to get you maybe home, Wanham, yeah. DJ Johnson was a guy that Panthers fans and a lot of us writers were right about because he really has not flashed at all.
No.
And that is some guy, that was one of Evero's guys. And so when I'm looking at Evero long term, I'm looking at the guys that you wanted to go to bat for, and I'm like, what happened with DJ Johnson? This is somebody you traded up for. So yeah, they need help at that edge position. You're right. I'm really not that familiar with Pat Jones. I know that people in Minnesota were kind of upset that he left.
Okay.
So, and looking at the posts of the fans where he was, people were like, okay, man, I wish we would have been able to keep him. So maybe that's a good thing. As you said, we don't necessarily lock in on other teams' players until they come to the Panthers.
Yeah, we don't have time
their
for that.
business, right? So yeah, I've always thought that edge position last year was a major area of need for the Panthers. And then I'm sure we'll get into that, but linebacker as well.
Yeah, like I'll say with edge, adding another high, like an upside kind of dude like Jones makes sense because then you got 3 vets and then, DJ Johnson, he's there. I don't know what the expectation is because like you bring up the Jero Vera thing too because like when I was talking about was he going to come back and, I had been told like, yeah, he's probably coming back. So like, I was like, all right, I told people up here, it's like, don't shoot the messenger. But he's likely coming back from what people I've been talking to. And you can point out, it's okay, the injuries and all of that. But also it's like he wanted DJ Johnson. He wanted to bring in guys like Fuller and Scott. And they didn't really pan out last year. I think primarily the injury for Fuller. Scott, he was one of the worst safeties in the league according to PFF the year prior. But there's been dudes that he wanted that haven't really fit into this defense. And then there's guys like Chen and like Luvu who were good players before he show up. And Louisville is good here, but he decided he wanted to move on to other places. That kind of raised an eyebrow. I was like, okay, what's going on here? But, they're going to honor that contract. He gets another year. We'll see how it plays out. I don't know. Like, how confident are you in things working out with the Jero this year as far as it, like, maybe he sticks around? But, Dave said, hey, that's my guy. It's not the scheme. I love the scheme. He clearly saying it's the players. So we'll see.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'm in love with the scheme or if I'm confident in Evero at all. I think that his first year he exceeded expectations, and then his second year he was complete. It was a failure, right? And so there were injuries. Okay, we'll give him that. But I always say, like, when good coaches, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even though you have good players go down, you are able to either coach up your players or adjust your scheme to fit your talent. And I think that Evero was too steadfast in his scheme, or maybe he did not want or had the ability to adjust his scheme to fit now his limited personnel. There have been other squads that had a lot of injuries, and they didn't see the fall off that the Carolina Panthers had.
The Detroit Lions.
There you go. That is my concern. So, you don't fall off a cliff. Like, you kind of have to have some type of safety net there. And that's what good coaching is. That's your safety net. Yeah, you might draft, talented players. You lose a Derek Brown very early in the season. Yeah, that's going to hurt. But now these are your guys too. We always hear next man up. Well, then you got to coach up your next man up. And if you don't coach them up or you don't adjust your scheme to fit your personnel, then I have a problem with that. And so right now I have very little confidence in Evero. We'll see what happens this season. But, also I think that David Tepper is tired of playing coaches their guaranteed contracts. So that might have also played a role into, the decision the decision to keep Evero an additional year. So we'll see.
Yeah, a lot of dead money still on that Matt Rule contract and Frank Reich, who apparently going to be coaching at Stanford this year. Oh, which, okay, cool. Good for you, Frank. Enjoy a year out there in Palo Alto. But, because I agree with you, like the defense, like if you watch the games back in 23, it was a lot better than like what you would expected, considering like the amount of injuries that they had and even just the overall talent level. Then like last year, yeah, you lose Derek Brown, but also you don't have Brian Burns anymore. You don't have Frankie Louvu. I mean, the Louvu part of it all is kind of on EJ. But, man, I don't know if that defense is ever good, though, because I talked about, like, I'm looking at the notes I had last year going into the season, just looking, like, at the advanced metrics. Because, I mean, okay, fine. Total defense, they were 4th. They were 6th in yards per play. All right, but you look at the advanced metrics, 23rd in EPA, 25th in DVOA. So they weren't a good defense. And then you look at what they were this past year. Well, they were dead last in EPA and DVOA. They were, of course, dead last in total defense and all of that. And you look at it as like, has this guy even fielded a good defense? All right, I watched the games 2023. They held up more than they probably should have. But last year, I don't know. But, I've been more of a defender because I look at the overall talent level. But still, it's got to be better, obviously. Safety. Actually, you brought up linebacker. That's a group. Well, I do think there are questions. Like Trevor Wallace, I think a lot of people are trying to crown him already. I thought he played well considering the expectation that he was supposed to step in there. It was supposed to be Shaq and Josie last year. Josie was kind of down, then played better, then got hurt. And then Roseboom, okay, he's coming off of a career year. I didn't watch a ton of the Rams, but if the Rams really wanted him, and that's known to be a great defense, he'd still be in LA. So that kind of raised an eyebrow for me. But then you look at some of like his like PFF numbers, like run, like defense, not good. So, I mean, how are you feeling about that? Because you brought them up, because I do think that might be a little bit of a question mark.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is. Like Josie is what, 30 now, so he's getting up there in age, and like you said, I feel like he had an up and down season. He played better toward the end of the season, and he did have some injury issues. Trevor Wallace was thrown into the fire as a rookie, right? Especially having Mike duties kind of early on, and and he was serviceable. It wasn't like everybody was yelling about how trash he was, but he's still, a rookie. And so he's a guy that's gonna have to have some development. As you mentioned, I did not watch Roseboom. So I can't really speak to how good he is. I'm just saying this linebacker crew, nobody sticks out.
Yeah, that's fair.
And nobody sticks out.
And it's not like they have like edge rusher is kind of the same, but you have a name.
Yeah.
Clowney. Here, I mean, maybe Josie Jewell was like a name. I don't really feel like he's ever really been a name. I mean, I've known him since like he was at Iowa, and like, okay, the dude can play. Like he wouldn't still be in the league if he couldn't, but it's like, okay, like where are we at this point in time? Because this feels like to me that might be a spot like in a draft too. Like they might need to address, because they looked long term last year as they drafted Wallace in the 3rd round. I don't know if you thought they were taking a linebacker that high, but I certainly didn't think they were going to take a linebacker that high. Running back, same case, especially a running back coming off of an ACL tear. They didn't think they were going to go after it. I could understand. Okay, they look at Chuba, they look at Miles. They want a guy who's a little bit more versatile, sure, but at 2nd round, 46. All right, so we'll see what they do there. Let's take one more pause before I get you out of here, and let's talk about that safety spot. Let's also kind of just look at like overall like where they're at here, heading into the NFC South here in 2025. So Julian Council here with Vashti Hurt on this episode of Locked On Panthers. We'll be back here in just a moment. All right, Vashti. So, I mean, you said it earlier, like Dan Morgan told us what he was going to do. He was going to go out there and fix the defense. And he said last year even too about the offense, like, we're going to go do that. So when Dan Morgan says something, he's going to stand by his word. And he talked about last week when speaking to the media, him and Brant Tillis. I think it's the first time we actually heard from Brant, actually like at a media setting like that. He talked about safety as a spot that they clearly are thin at and they need to address. Because look at the roster right now, it's Nick Scott, who, I mean, it's break glass in case of emergency. You don't want him out there playing defensive snaps this upcoming season. No offense to Nick Scott and his family, but we all understand what it is right now. Damani Richardson. I got him penciled in there. I don't necessarily feel like they want to start him there. They felt like they had to last year with the injuries and just kind of the guys not living up to it. And then, of course, they spent money on Trevon Moore. But that's a spot clearly they are going to address. I know they brought in like Julian Blackman, And they also brought in Marcus Williams. Like, do you see them like going with the vet before they get to the draft, or is it feel like to you like that's probably just like they're going to wait to the draft to get that done?
I don't know. Those guys are still available, so maybe
Yeah.
they wait and see what shakes in the draft and then go from there. I mean, but you only have 3 safeties on the roster right now, right? And I'm assuming outside of Trevon, there is no other starter. Like you said, Nick Scott was not very good, and he's looked at as mainly a special teams guy now.
Mhm.
And then Damani Richardson flashed, but is he a consistent starter back there and at safety? I wouldn't say so. So the young guys still like we talked about this coaching staff said they want to be a developmental coaching staff. So that's great. But when you want to develop young talent, you have to give them time. And so you can't operate with 3 safeties on your roster,
No.
period. So I think that they'll wait. I mean, what the draft is 2 weeks away?
3, yeah.
2-3 weeks away.
Yeah.
So maybe they see how the draft shakes out and then go from there with, potentially signing other veterans.
What do you think is smarter, to wait after the draft or go ahead and get it done?
It really depends on what their draft board is. I mean, we've been hearing that they're going to do best player available. If I were them, I probably would sign a vet if they're available. If they want to come, that's another thing. Maybe you can bring in guys all you want to, but if they're getting looks other places, they might not want to come to Carolina for whatever reason. And so, I probably would go the vet route, and then that kind of gives you even more options heading into the draft as far as where you go, how you play with those picks that you have. But either way, it's a position that has to be addressed, but who knows how they'll do it.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine they get a vet, they draft somebody, and that gives you 5, and then they got to fill out 90 men on the roster. So there's going to be camp bodies, and depending on how things play out, it's like, roster cut downs, like that might be a spot just like looking at it here in April. Like that's still a long way away to go, but I got to imagine they bring in 2 like viable players here by the end of the month. Like that. I mean, that's something that probably must happen. And then at least just let it be known, like he's not saying how many, but he's saying like, yeah, we're gonna take care of it. So we'll see. I mean, I definitely don't think at 8. Like I don't know how you feel about 8 right now, because that's where I'm really focused on. Like I see some of these mock drafts have been saying like a consensus has been an edge rusher. It's been Jalen Walker. We don't really need. You don't have to get into names you don't want to. That's totally fine with me. But I've been seeing edge rusher at 8. And then I've been seeing like actually corner at 57, which I find interesting because it does make sense. So I know you were a Mike Jackson guy, and I know because you were at his presser, and he was, apparently he really, went in deep about kind of where he thought his career was at when Seattle, and then how he got here to Carolina and kind of feels revitalized. And I think it's a great story. Like I think it would be great for Carolina to be able to have JC and have Mike for 3 straight years there as CB1, CB2, but they do need another outside corner there. I know that they like Caleb Evans, and they gave him a shot last year. He got hurt in that game against Atlanta, unfortunately. And then, Shamar Bartholomew was on the roster like all year and did not play a defensive snap until week 18 because of that Caleb Evans injury. So there's 2 guys there that they could think about, but maybe it might make sense though, just to have like a young guy out there who can rotate, maybe be that 3rd man. And then depending on how Mike Jack plays, that might be your starter in 2026. That's a big thing. It's not like the deal they gave him ensures he's going to be here
right
both years.
I wouldn't actually. I hadn't heard about corner in the 2nd round, but I wouldn't be mad at it. If you can get a guy who you felt like is a 1st round talent and in that 2nd round spot, then why not? Why not pull the trigger on that?
Yeah, I look. There's other people who are way more in tune with the draft and like what the value is and all of that. I mean, I know I was talking to a dude, Damian Parson, who does the Locked On NFL Draft podcast, also does stuff for Bleacher Report. He was talking about dude from ECU, Siobhan Ravel, who's coming off an ACL too, but that was pretty early in the season. And I know he was somebody they talked about was going to be like a 1st round talent. So if that's the kind of situation now, obviously with the knee injury, that will raise my eyebrows among Panther fans.
How do you feel about that? How do you feel about drafting players coming off injury?
I honestly, like, I don't hate it because, like, nowadays, especially like with an ACL, like, that's an injury that we've seen so many people come back from. Like, if it's an Achilles, then that's a little bit different for me. Like a knee, I don't necessarily love it, depending on what the timing is. Like Brooks, you knew he was not going to be ready to go. Like that was straight PR when they were talking about, oh, he'll be ready by July 1. It's like, probably not. Like if you tore your ACL in November, you're not going to be ready to go play in September, probably. So for like at least this guy from ECU, like it happened back in like September, like August. So it really depends like where you're at. Because if you're asking them to come in and play for you immediately, that's not a good spot. But if it's possible, like where they have right now with JC and with Mike, and if that's what they want to do as far as have those two guys and they want to draft somebody behind them, then like there's not that much expectation coming in. So I don't know. Like I don't necessarily love it, but I can get past it. It's not like a deal breaker for me personally. I don't know how you feel.
I'm not a fan of it particularly.
Okay.
Just because of what happened with Jonathan Brooks. Like
Sure.
I didn't think they should have played him at all last season. There really was no need to, in my opinion.
Well, that's not a bad, hey, especially now things have worked out, but no, but what you're saying does make sense. Like, even like back in that point in time, because I was like, well, like when does he need to come back? Like late season? Like if anything, if they're out of it, which obviously they were, fine, bring him back, see what he's got, but does it matter?
Not really, but yeah, just because injuries can go one of two ways. I'm not an advocate for higher picks, first, second, maybe even
Sure.
third. Later round picks that aren't, that don't cost as much, then yeah, okay, that's fine. But early picks coming fresh off of an injury, like I don't know about that.
And they kind of did this. Now it's a different regime. And Dan wasn't here yet. He came later on that offseason. They kind of did the same thing with Terrace Marshall because he was a guy who had always been banged up. Some teams had a first round grade on him, and he was there in the second round. They took him, and we saw things haven't really worked out for him. And that might be other stuff, but okay, let me get you on this because I'm looking at this team. I'm not looking at football teams. Like I'm looking at the line of scrimmage first and foremost, and offensive line don't really have questions there. Do they have an all-pro, Pro Bowl talent? Probably not. Does it matter? No, as long as they can stay healthy. And we've seen even last year when dudes go down, the guys that they have there, like Zavala, really impressed after being borderline unplayable his rookie year, but he was thrown into that spot. Not really on him that he had to play because they didn't have the depth and there was injuries there to Brady, which obviously they were not expecting to happen in week one. They knew about Austin. It was going to take some time, but Court being back, Brady being back was a surprise to me. I don't know how you felt about that, but I did not
was shocked.
Which makes me wonder is like, like, is he gonna? I don't think he's competing for a job, maybe at center, but is that like a guy who's gonna come back and be the right tackle next season in 2026 if they move on from Taylor? Like that's the only thing I could think of that would make a lot of sense. Other than like he just likes being here, and maybe his market didn't pan out because I guess clearly his market did not play out the way he wanted if he's back here in Carolina. But I think the offensive line's solid, defensive line. Derek coming back, that obviously will help immensely. I think A'Shawn Robinson is a solid rotational player. I think Bobby Brown III can be good for them based off of just the run stopping numbers, and that should be an improved unit. And then quarterback, look, he's not going to do what he did week 18 every week. But if he can play at the level he played those final 9 games, where I think PFF had him as a top 7 quarterback in the league, not necessarily expecting Bryce to be a top 7 quarterback throughout an entire season, top 15, then like they might have something here. And knowing that this division, Baker Mayfield's the best quarterback, like, hey, I got love and respect for Baker dating back to when he was at Texas Tech. But I mean, it's not like Baker Mayfield's insurmountable. It's not like Michael Penix Jr., who also, I mean, dog, it's not like he's insurmountable right now in New Orleans. Okay, whatever. Like, I mean, how far do you think they are?
I don't think anybody is far in the NFC South. I really think that it's open. Tampa Bay has won it, of course, the last couple of years, but I just think it's up for grabs, and I think Dave and Dan think that it's up for grabs. And if they kind of tweak it, if they had won a couple of those close games at the end of the season last year, they're right there in the hunt. So if through the draft or free agency, if you can buy yourself 3 or 4 more games in an NFC South where you don't have to be completely dominant, at the end of December, beginning of January, you're playing meaningful football games for a spot to host a playoff game as a division as a division champion or division winner. So I think it's up for grabs. I think the Panthers could do it if they really have fixed this defense and the offense doesn't have any type of fall off.
Yeah, we'll see, because I don't want to go out here and get people charged up just yet. Like, for me, they're gonna have to show.
They're gonna be charged up regardless, Julian.
I know.
Come on.
But at least for me, I already said, folks, like, look, they gotta go out there and win some games, because I'm not doing it anymore. Like, I've seen it. I've been like, oh, hey, maybe. No, they need to win games, and then I'll be like, okay, maybe this team actually can do it this year. So I look at the moves, where the foundation's at right now. It's a lot better than it's been recently. And that's saying a lot, because it was bad. So we'll see what they do here in this next month as they try to continue to build this team. And yeah, like you said, the NFC South is always wide open. But Vashti, follow her over on Twitter, X, if you want to call it that. But Elon sold it, so maybe we're getting the bird back. Hopefully,
he did.
Yeah, he sold it.
How did I miss that? When was this?
Sunday is when I saw the news. Yeah, he sold Twitter. So, hey, bring back the bird. Give me back my free blue check mark that I earned rightfully. I'm not paying for no check mark. So let's go. So apparently that's sold. So hopefully the bird comes back, but we'll see. But check her out here on Twitter at Ms. Carolina Blitz, also at Key Blitz, and check out all her work. I mean, if you just love North Carolina sports, I mean, what are you doing not following Vashti? She's all over the place. And check out her coverage, of course, this weekend as Duke probably wins the national championship. I don't want to see it happen, but it's going to happen. Like, I'm just kind of resigned to it all. But I appreciate you, as always, Vashti, for coming on here.
All right. Thanks for having me, Julian.
All right. We'll wrap up the show here in just a moment. Thanks again to Vashti Hurt of Carolina Blitz coming on up here. And again, y'all, like, seriously, like, she is the hardest working woman in North Carolina media, as she is all over the place throughout the year. I mean, basically from like Labor Day, when the NFL season begins, I guess the week after Labor Day, all the way until like the end of the draft in May. Like, she is always working. So I appreciate her finding some time to come up here and talk with me. And again, like I told y'all, this draft season, trying to get as many people on as possible. Was talking to somebody last week. They're saying, oh, yeah, I got some PTO I'm about to take, but then, like, I'll be available. And then they just got married. It's like, dog, like, I mean, I could see you get married. Why didn't you just tell me you get married? And I'll talk to you afterwards. But, yeah, we'll get that person on hopefully soon. And I got some other things lined up for you. So, like, Mondays and Wednesdays, as I'm looking to try to have some guests on here on the show. I don't even know why I'm still wearing these headphones, because I don't need them. But appreciate Vashti coming on again. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter at Julian Council, where I will be answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions here again. Also, hit me up over on Blue Sky at Julian Council to get those questions into me right now. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole as always, keep pounding, and I'll talk to y'all on Thursday.